This is the Behavioral View. I'm Shannon Hill, and joining me is Nissa Van Etten. We're your hosts for candid conversations about applied behavior analysis. No gimmicks, just real talk, practical tips, and maybe a few laughs. Come on and join us. Let's have some fun. Hi, I just wanted to give everyone a quick heads up about today's episode. Almost all of our Behavioral View episodes are CEUs. We try to strive to make sure they are, but occasionally there's a topic that we want to bring to you that may not actually be CEU relevant, and today is one of those. So even though we are talking about a lot of CR specific products, and so we can't give a CEU for that, we think it's a useful session to learn about how we're managing the intersection of technology and ABA services. So hope you'll tune in, and we'll be back around soon with another CEU relevant episode. Thanks. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Behavioral View. I am Shannon Hill, the editor-in-chief here at CentralReach Institute, and I'm really excited to introduce the panel that's with us today. And I feel weird even calling it a panel. We're having a conversation with some of my coworkers. So those of you who have been tuning in this year, we have been trying to make sure that we give you a good view of who is behind the scenes at CentralReach, especially among our behavior analysts. So we have our third chair that has been rotating among some of the behavior analysts that are working that we want to make sure you guys get to know. And then we decided to do something even more special and talk about the future of behavior analysis writ large and how technology is going to fit into that. And who better to talk about that than someone straight from our leadership team. So before I get into introducing those special guests, let me let Nissa, my forever and ever sidekick in this podcast anyway, say hello.
Everyone. Nissa Van Etten. I'm the Director of Clinical Training and CR Institute here at CentralReach. I'm excited for our group today.
Yeah. So our third panelist is Heather Morton. Would you like to say hi?
Hi, I'm Heather Morton, and I am the Director of the Learning and Organizational Development team here at CR Institute. And super excited to join as on the panel today.
Great. And Heather, you want to say just a word or two about what that means your job is? What are you doing every day?
Yes, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that with Sullens here. So what I do every day is essentially I'm overseeing the learning management system, right? So I'm making sure things are running smoothly in there, but then I'm also working with Shannon and her amazing content team to make sure that we're getting what our customers need in that platform. So I talk a lot with our customers and really trying to lean into where they're at right now, but then also where they're trying to go with their training and development programs and making sure that we're staying in touch with that as we continue to build out our roadmap.
Thank you. And then, as Heather has alluded to, our special guest today is Chris Sullens. Chris, you want to just say hi and tell the people who you are?
Hi, Chris Sullens, CEO of CentralReach. I'm honored and humbled to be part of this panel today. And I'm hoping you don't ask me what I do.
What was next?
It's going to be a little disappointing for people.
Great. I think most people kind of understand what a CEO is, so we'll let you off the hook on that one.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
So we like to start off with just a get to know you kind of question and let our guests pick that. And the question that Chris chose for us is a book or article that you come back to time and again. So have you guys had an opportunity to think about that? Is everybody ready with your answer?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll go first. I rotate books. I can read a chapter at a time, and I take a lot of breaks. So I always go back to Cooper. Cooper is the source for everything in terms of behavior analysis, and I love to review it and make sure I'm still on the ball with my discussions. But what I'm reading currently, because I'm not always in the Cooper book, and for anyone who is a new behavior analyst, you will not always go back to Cooper. You want to put that thing away for a couple of years. But I'm reading Traction right now, and I'm really enjoying it as something that gives me a different overview of business from a different perspective than behavior analysis. So that's been really fun.
Nice. Heather, how about you? You ready?
Ready. So actually a book that I really like to come back to frequently is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. So I find that her teachings on being a courageous leader and being vulnerable and building trust and resilience is something that I really value. I try to do that with our team here at Sierra Institute, but really beyond that, I try to do that with our customers. So I really love being able to just be open, having open conversations about where we're at, where the field's at, where they're at, and really trying to build that trust and openness with our customers is super important to me and something that I try to foster in my role. So always going back to that when I feel like I need a little encouragement to do that.
Love it. Love it. Chris, we'll save you for last. For me, I've talked about it, we've done this. This is our 4th year now. So we've thrown out a lot of books, and I was trying to think of something that I haven't mentioned previously. I think it might have been 2010. I'm going back a little bit here. AAIDD, which is the leading advocacy group for intellectual and developmental disabilities, completely rewrote the definition of intellectual disability. And it's changed again since then, but that was a paradigm shift where we first started thinking about and actually pushing the field, not just to think about, but to act on the idea that what matters most in defining a person is the amount of support they need and what their goals are as a human being, less about what their deficits are and how they compare to the rest of the world. So I kind of go with that with people across the spectrum now, whether you have a disability or not. Whenever we're labeling people, to think at what they need and how you can fulfill that, how you can make changes in the environment before you just write them off or say that they are less than in some kind of way. So it really shaped. I was in graduate school when that one came out, and it just really shaped my view of how to look at people in general.
Great.
Cool. What's
All
your
right.
block?
So I cheated as usual. So I have three books. So, but they're ones I go back to. First one I go back to, not necessarily driven by myself, but more my 4-year-old and 2-year-old, which is The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. So I love that book. I think it's particularly relevant in a lot of ways now, and my girls love it. So that's the first. The other two are business oriented, and both are written by the same author, which is a guy named Ben Horowitz. And so he's a partner at a venture firm called Andreessen Horowitz, and was formerly a CEO of, some fairly successful kind of scale up startups. And so the books are The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is my favorite of the two. And the second one he wrote was What You Do Is Who You Are, which is really about culture. And I think what I like is, in both of these, I think there's kind of the view of, leadership. You're just kind of making decisions and things are happening and, you're growing and, everything either lines up or you address it. But I do think, for an organization that grows like us, and frankly, our customers go through this, given the growth trajectories they have, it always requires decisions you don't necessarily want to make. But if you don't make them, the impact is much more broad than it is maybe on the particular customer or, product decision or people decision. And so for me, I'm a big fan of and a believer in culture, and I do think, just given my last experience in here, if you don't make the hard calls when you need to, it tends to have a pretty negative impact overall.
Interesting. And that kind of ties pretty quickly into some of the topics that we wanted to talk about today. And kind of kicking off with not only do you think about leadership from the point of view of you're leading different people, but CentralReach is in many ways a leader in the field of ABA. And I just would kind of like for us to talk, and I want to take a second to acknowledge it's a little weird to interview your CEO. Podcast has not ever been like thought of as an interview thing. We bring our guest on, we want to highlight your expertise and your knowledge, but it's more conversational. So guys, please let's don't just put all of this on Chris's shoulders. Let's all chime in here on these things. But what kind of ways do you see CentralReach not only just providing a service and making some money, but what's our role? How are we giving back to the field that is giving us so much?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want me to start, and then I think you guys definitely should chime in. Um, I think there's a number of ways, um, and they've kind of changed or evolved in some ways over time, and then some are kind of fundamental, I think. Um, and certainly, we are not perfect, and there's always things we can do better. And you'll hear me say that a million times, as you all know, I do internally as well. But I think about, there's an acute thing which came, around COVID, which is one. But I would say the fundamental areas for me, and again, I'm sure I miss other ones, but revolve around a couple of things. So one is this behavioral view podcast, and the fact that we fund and encourage and want to expand kind of what we're doing with this to bring kind of speakers in and best practices and viewpoints within the industry. Like, we don't have to do this, right? And so you can think your proverbial like software company is a bunch of kids in a garage, engineers, and you see that. Like, I see some of these startups where it's like, okay, well, what does your team look like? Well, I have 2 salespeople, I have 10 engineers, and I lean on my customers to tell me what's going on. Like, I actually was um, at a conference, and one vendor, that was their pitch, was we're a bunch of really smart guys. We do like really smart stuff, but we don't know anything about the industry. So you guys tell us, and we'll like partner on this. And again, that doesn't mean we don't care about what our customers say. We absolutely, as Heather talked about, we spend a lot of time, I spend a lot of time trying to understand from their perspective. But if you think about from our perspective, we have somebody who's a director of research, right? Rick Cabina. And he's been on the team since I started, and we put him in that role, and that doesn't generate any revenue for us, never has. But it generates for the industry. I think he's out there working with customers, and he's doing studies, and he's doing thought leadership, and he's spending his time, really trying to advance the field. And so for me, like, that's an important component of it. I think Canary BI. So again, we rolled out this data best, if you think of it like benchmarking data around the industry to help the industry understand, like, where is everybody at, like, on average. And because of our leadership position and the customer depth that we have across all segments and the volume of data that we have, we can actually provide benchmarks within certain segments so that, as a small business, what do other small, like, as a small business, doesn't matter like what the largest people do. Maybe it's interesting, but you don't have those resources, and vice versa. As a large business, doesn't help me to know kind of how small businesses. And so we're not charging for that. And there's a lot that goes into it. We have an entire data science team that spends all their days looking at the data and trying to make sense of it. And we present that data. And so I feel like that is also helpful to try to give our customers the ability to look at how they're doing relative to their last year, to their budget, to their plan, but also to the industry benchmark. Um, and as I said, it's these best practices, a behavioral view, and the kind of people that we have within the organization, which in some ways help us generate revenue, but in a lot of ways we don't necessarily need the volume of BCBAs that we have. We don't necessarily need. We have 7 BCBAs with doctorate degrees, right? And so, but we being me, and I think the rest of the organization, highly value that perspective. And I think it makes us different, and I think it ultimately makes our products better, and it helps us kind of be a thought leader and partner to our customers, and not just a vendor who's slinging technology and saying, "Hey, you figure out how to use it." Like, we don't do that. So we're certainly not trying to tell our customers what to do, but I think by providing these kind of thought leadership and these kind of resources, we at least can have a more valuable role in a conversation with our customers about what's working, what isn't, where is it going, and have some points of view that we think maybe help move the industry forward.
I have so many thoughts to jump off from that. I had to write them down because I knew that they were going to come. But I agree completely, Chris. I think that, one of the things that makes us a great leader in the space is the expertise that we have in all departments, and that we as a team in all the different departments work so well together. Everyone listens to each other. They collaborate well. We've got behavior analysts and special educators and even RBTs that have worked in the field, that have interfaced with clients that require the services or the students, so they can inform the dev team or the product team or, the training teams on what's necessary and what our customers might want, in addition to listening to our customers who may have different needs for their particular organization. Other things I really thought about were that user experience, right? That we're thinking about what's it going to feel like for our customers when they're on the floor in the classroom or in the home with the learner. How quickly do they need to collect that data? Where is it uploaded? I think all of those components and that vantage point that we have from such a large professional team is really nice for the field to understand that we are thinking this through at every level and having these conversations multiple times. And then from the institute perspective, I really think that we lean ourselves into looking ahead. What's coming for the next task list? What is required for CEUs? What's important to the field in terms of training, right? When we're thinking about professionalism and developing your career in our field, we know that there's that we walk in the door and I maybe like ABA, maybe I want to work with these individuals, all the way to I've been in the field for 10 to 15 years and I want to continue to build my expertise and move into thought leadership. What courses do I need and how do I evaluate that as a professional? I think we see it from all aspects, from the technology and software usage to the training component. And I really value that as an employee of CentralReach. I think that it's a nice, robust team that we have. And through every level and every department, it's been fun to interact with everyone here.
Heather, I'm curious what was coming to your mind.
Yeah. So, I agree with Nissa. I'm thinking that we've had many internal conversations where Chris is telling us that how important it is to hear from those customers and to be those leaders in the field. And, coming into the role that I have at Sierra Institute, where I was mailed a bunch of assessments to do and given no training on how to do those assessments, and just, being able to lean into that and seeing how important it is to get the training and make those trainings more accessible to these orgs. And, we're still talking to orgs that are kind of doing it that way, even, I don't want to age myself and how long I've been doing this field, but, for quite some time now. Right. And so I think that I love hearing that. I love that CentralReach does lean in to help us support those things that maybe it's not about the dollar, right? It's about the fact that this is what's going to make our field better, which ultimately is what helps serve the clients that are being worked with and why we all do this work. And so that's kind of what comes to mind for me is yeah, we're able to be out there showing, this is the best practice. And this is what is going to benefit all your clinicians and RBTs and things like that.
I agree with everything that you guys have said. One thing that was really coming to my mind when I was thinking about this is our field has changed a lot. It's philosophically in terms of not just the types of tools we have, but just during my time here, we've had to wrestle with things like what side of history are we going to be on when we talk about DEI issues, when we talk about assent based services, as some of the people within our leadership in ABA have wrestled with some of this, right? What are we going to stand for? And I have been really happy about the fact that I do feel like we have a lot of conversations about those types of issues, and we take them seriously. And there is some thoughtful consideration of what side of history are we going to be on when all of this is over. It's nice to be able to support all people doing all things of all philosophies and opinions and that sort, but sometimes as a corporation, we have to decide which way we're going to go on some of these things. And I've been really happy that we've really taken a leadership on things like compassionate care. Thinking about we are some of the first people to have put out anything for behavior analysis on assent based services, and I still see in social media times that when people are asking where do I learn more about this, that they're being driven to CentralReach Institute because we had the backing to push that sort of information out. So I think it is a huge responsibility, especially with all of the changes that are happening culturally and such right now. So it's
Yeah, oh,
uh,
sorry, go ahead.
well, go ahead.
I was just going to say one other simple little thing. And again, we're not perfect for sure. And we're also not doing all this pro bono. So to have all these people,
Yeah.
we need a business, but we do think about I think all of your points and hopefully, through mine as well. This is a first class consideration. This is not like a byproduct. It's kind of how do we blend these two things together? Because we think we all win if we make our customers stronger and better. And, obviously that benefits us as well. But going back to how we value the industry perspective, and again, this doesn't make any of the rest of us behavior analysts by any means, but even simple things like from the day I got here, we put in like a new employee onboarding. One big component of that is teaching everyone, engineers, support people, the language of ABA and what our customers do, right? Rick has done that and we've, it's evolved over time, but, to the point of like, you need to understand, like, how do we as a field talk about the clients that we have
Mhm.
and the way that, because language is so important and it's particularly important. I learned very early on as a non-ABA person how important that is. And so again, it's, it goes to, from my perspective, goes to we're not just here to sell software. We're here to try to make an impact. Mm, And, and so, all of you are, I think, part and parcel and frankly, a good example of the investments we make to do that.
Thank you for saying that. I think we all strive. I don't know that we always are successful, but that's a part of it too. Is that we're not trying to be, we're not trying to make this projection that we always know what's right or that we're always doing things correctly, but it's the point that we're striving for it.
Mhm.
So, having said that, the technology world's changing a little bit right now. And
Absolutely.
so, um, there's a lot of talk right now about how the upcoming changes and the things that are happening on a daily basis right now, particularly with generative AI, are going to affect the service world of ABA. And I'm just curious to hear, as particularly Chris, because you are out there and you're talking
Mhm.
to so many people, and where do you really see the main issues
Yeah.
and that sort of thing on that?
So I think, and we can talk about, maybe AI in a little bit of more kind of detail, but, I, I view AI as an enabler. Internally, we talk about how we want to boost, basically AI boost the workforces of our customers. And so again, we can go into more detail around that, but AI to me is not like an end state or a thing. And when I think about like the industry and where it's going, like AI is just a tool. It's a tool that allows us to get to where we're going. And so what you won't hear me say is like AI is going to be, a big part of what goes on. I think it will be a big part, um, but I think it needs to be thought through and applied appropriately. And I think right now there's some varying degrees of kind of that. For me, like when I look at, so I look at it in terms of where the industry is going, and you guys probably have much better perspective because you're one closer to the ground. You come from the other side of the table and you see the field and the science and how that evolves in a way that I don't. Um, but as I look at it, I look at again the Canary BI data, and what are we seeing? Kind of how is that evolving? Um, and do we think that's going to continue to evolve, or is there some implication, going forward? Obviously, there's a lot of customers with a lot of conversations with customers, and usually the CEOs or leaders of our customers. But I also spend a lot of time with the investors and others, and kind of what their perspectives are and where they're kind of thinking and seeing things going. And then obviously, I get a lot of information from all the experts in our company. And so again, we talk about like the resource and assets that we bring to bear, and we just pulled this together. You guys helped us do that, but it's amazing. Like 437 hours or 437 years of experience is the level of experience that we have kind of within the company in the field. And so there's a lot of great perspectives. And I think for me, I need to listen as much as tell. But when I look at kind of all those things together, I think there's probably four things that at least to me, I think I see as kind of things that will change or the industry is going to evolve to. And I mean, like I said, there's probably a million others, but one is value-based care, which there's been a lot of talk of. We haven't made a ton of progress on. And I kind of think of it coincidentally with like the fidelity of outcomes-based care, right? So we talk about, and again, we just talked about this in the region team, but payers are talking about value-based care. There's some applications, but it seems like it's fairly small relative to the volume of payments that are being made, reimbursements that are being made. But where I see it more is within our customer base. I think our customer base is driving the outcomes piece, which is where they should be. It should be coming from our customer base, and then they should be advocating to the payers to say, this is how you apply value-based care. And that's one of the reasons we made the investment in Canary BI. And one of the, we want to be a partner in that. We don't want to be talking to the payer and like saying, here's the data, you make the decision, payer. We want to be supporting our customers so that they can drive better outcomes for those that they're working with. And then that becomes the framework for how we do value-based care, because that's the way it should work. And I think we have a chance to do that in this industry that maybe in other medical specialties, they don't. And so we need to take advantage of that. And I think that, to me, revolves around AI becomes a big piece of that. It revolves around having I'll call it standardized assessment. I'll call it standardized care plan. That doesn't mean like it's a cut and paste with every child, obviously. But I do think there needs to be some level of standardization based on an assessment outcome to care plan delivery, so that when we look at the data, we can connect the dots and say, and that includes treatment fidelity and a whole bunch of other things that we need to measure, right? I think the second one for me is like a movement towards the whole child approach, especially as our customers are moving into clinics and it looks a lot more like schools. And so that's why we made an acquisition for social emotional learning. Executive functioning is, yes, ABA is very important. There's a whole bunch of like skills that we want to teach and allow the learners to acquire. But I think, an approach of how they acquire skills in terms of group interaction and, being kind of, more social than maybe we had the chance to do when most of the services were delivered at home. I feel like that becomes something that kind of is, it's not tomorrow, but I think that's an area that at least I hear and see, people looking at, and why we made some investments the way we did to that. And multidisciplinary, and this comes out of the data, is we see much more growth in terms of multidisciplinary practices and services being provided within a single provider. So speech, OT, pediatric PT. And so as a product and as a company, it's a first class consideration on our roadmap is how do we support those workflows? How do we support that? Because I feel like what I've seen even in the time that I've been here since 2018 is ABA specialist organizations. And that's really all of our pipeline and all of our customer base. That's what it looked like in 2018, 2019, 2020. And now when I look at it, 21, 22, the majority of our pipeline is multi-D. And our customer base is rapidly kind of scaling in multi-D. So that doesn't mean the whole industry will go that way, but I do think that's a big consideration. And then the last piece is caregiver engagement and involvement. In reinforcing for sure, and that's kind of how we've thought about our care coordinator or care companion, the tooling that we want to provide customers to enable and unlock, the caregiver so they can be a better partner, more effective partner in care delivery. But I do see, and we see this among a few of our customers where the caregiver is taking an even bigger role in direct services. So I don't know where that goes, and that's not necessarily what we're trying to enable. But I think regardless of if you go that far or if you end up somewhere in terms of I have a direct services that are being provided by a specialist, a behavior analyst, and now I have a parent who has the curriculum and the content and the videos and an easy way to reinforce that. I just think for us to drive outcomes, that needs to be a big part of the overall kind of care plan. And again, that's an area that we've made a lot of, investments in. And I think AI plays a role in each of these, but AI is an enabler, not an end, in and of itself.
I think that is something that I've heard reverberating around that idea that it's a tool and it helps us get to all of these other places that we want to go. And my mind I'm constantly going back in my head. I don't know about the two of you, but Skinner, and I am anti-deification of Skinner, but Skinner was always looking for ways to take human error out of the equation for things like data collection and counting behavior, that sort. And then the work that Fred Keller did on personalized systems of instruction, Skinner as well, when he went into the fourth grade or whatever math classes, and looking for ways that technology can automate some of these things and that it's just going to allow the humans to focus on other things when we take these things out of the equation that a machine arguably can do as well and sometimes better than what a human is able to do. So I get really excited thinking that again, as much as I don't like the deification of the forefathers of ABA, the fact that they saw forward all of this and we're trying to put it into place so early on, and that now we're finally getting to the point where we would blow their minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, Shannon. I also see it as like all these things that Chris just listed, value-based care, focusing on whole child, multi-D, parent training, the demand on our BCBAs and clinicians, and with a shortage on top of it. So, they're juggling extremely large caseloads and things. All of that, you have to have tools. You have to have tools that can make you more efficient and better at doing those things, because I talk to them all the time, right? They're wearing so many hats. And how do I also incorporate all the training that my staff needs so that they can be better at all these skills? Like, it's just so much. And so I think the fact that we're leaning into these tools that can help us do all of those things, is just, it's just such a huge benefit. I see our own team using it all the time, right? We are a lean team. And it's like there's so much to get done in a day. And Shannon will say, "Oh, I've got this AI tool and it helped me do this and this, and this, and that's already done." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, that would have taken, 2 weeks to do that." And so I think just being able to lean into those tools, it's crucial to where our field is going and the pain points that our field has.
I think jumping on that point in terms of the tools that they use, and I know that as a team we use them, is that level of humanness that also needs to review the outputs, right? That when we use a tool to support the work that we're doing, we also have to review it and edit it and make sure that it actually aligns with the goal of what we're trying to either communicate, accomplish, or collect information on. All of this conversation makes me go all the way back to kind of how the field has evolved. Shannon, your first point, in that we've been around kind of a long time. I mean, I remember resisting going from using little masking tape and a pen, and I had it all over my legs for tracking frequency of man impacting. And then I had little clickers on my pants. So I remember with one particular learner, I had to wear pants with like really good buckles so I could put my clickers on and have my pen. And then going in, to the space where data collection on your phone or on a tablet was available. Even, and I wouldn't say Zoom because that wasn't available, but being able to have supervision on camera, all of these new things that were coming about maybe 20 years ago when I was, in home doing all the services, I was against a lot of it. It was like, I know how to collect data. I know when I make that tick mark, I know exactly where manding is on my leg versus tacting on my other leg. And now you're asking me to do it in, this device. What if I miss it? What if I leave the device behind? We've all shifted towards innovation, and innovation has allowed us to do our job better and to spend more time with the learners. And then even with parents, to spend more time with the parents, right? If I handed all of those tick marks and tapes to a parent and said, "This is what your child did today," it would not make as much sense as when I can show the graph and say, "This is where your child wasn't, asking for chips. And now they're asking for chips 40 times in an hour because here's the graph." And the output that didn't take me 5 sessions and 5, hours of actually graphing. So I think there's this level of leaning into innovation to support the work that we do, to spend more time with our learners, but even further, that there's always a humanness behind it, that a clinician, RBT, a behavior analyst is going to review that output and say, "Check, I agree," or, let me go back. Did I do something incorrectly when I spoke to the tool or the device that I'm using?
Nissa and I were talking about this a little bit yesterday, and to me, it was bringing me back to the dates when, and this dates me, assessments first started coming out with, we called them canned reports at the time. So automated reporting from your assessments. And I remember probably because my first love was writing. And I was just horrified. I do not want the computer to write this report for me. I can do this so much better. I have so many individualized insights and blah, blah, blah. And I really wouldn't even look at it for a long, long, long time until I started supervising other people. And guess what? A lot of people don't like doing that, find it very hard and tedious, and will spend 3 times as much time as necessary, from my point of view, on doing those kinds of things. And so I started embracing through supervision things like templates that have guides of telling you everything and making sure that everything in that template was actually included in your report. And yes, taking the automation, then comparing it to that checklist and looking to see, did the computer do it right? Would I have thrown in some context that the computer wasn't aware of? Absolutely. but it was those giving my students or my interns that list of things that this is what we're striving for. And your job is not to just rely on me to make sure I got it in there, because I don't always, or this computerized output to make sure that it gets it all in there, but to really think about what's the question that you're trying to ask with this assessment report, and did the final output get there? And it's a combination of all of those things that worked out for the best product for me anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point, and I think this, all of you made really good points. I think the QA aspect, and that you're kind of talking about that, and we talk about that, as you guys know, with respect to our notes AI, mobile AI, where we're doing session notes, and when I think about myself, so like for me, um, typically when I'm drafting something that I'm sending out, Karen or somebody else internally is like doing the first draft, right? Um, and that is pretty beneficial. Like I can draft the whole thing if I needed to, but then I spent my time kind of making sure the message is right and that the points are, and I can enhance that, right? And put my own spin on it. And I think that's what we see the behavior, with CR Essentials, and we hear from customers is, um, does it really matter that an RBT wrote like the specific things about this? I collected this data and here's what I did. Like, probably not. And going back to Nissa's point, where time should be spent is on the QA, and your point as well, Shannon, on the message. Like, is this telling the story that I want to tell about this session?
Yeah.
But there's no time to do that, right? You're not getting paid for it. And so you're scrambling, somebody is scrambling to write a note, to try to remember everything, get it down, and then they got to move on. And the level of QA goes down. And now if you can basically say like, hey, just look at the data, summarize that, and now let me like make sure the story fits. And I think the quality of what gets provided, and frankly, to a parent, to a payer, internally, to anybody else who's taking over that case down the line, is significantly better, right? And so again, does the AI replace the person? No, they're boosting the person. They're allowing, and the person is spending their time doing what they should be doing, which is applying the knowledge and expertise they have in the field to a note that has been written, to make sure that that reflects kind of, the ethics and everything else that goes along with it. So again, not to belabor a point, but I do think that is to me, that's the epitome of this like AI boosted workforce, which is we're not trying to replace anybody, and we're not trying to like have technology like take over the world. What we're trying to do is let the technology do the stuff that has to be done, but doesn't need the horsepower of a true behavior analyst for RBT to do, so that they can spend their time using their brain and their skills the way that they're going to maximize the impact on these learners.
I mean,
Yeah, and I would say when you sorry, Shannon.
go ahead, Hager.
I was just going to say, when you streamline all of that, how much more efficient and effective we become. Trying to read through a bunch of notes that are written 80 different ways. And when you're taking over a case and things, it's tough. Streamlining all of that just makes us more efficient and I would argue effective as well.
Absolutely. I think my mind was going in two different directions at one time as we were speaking through all of that. And I'll just throw out both sides, and we can do our last segment on whichever way you guys want to go. One is we're all in. I mean, we're doing this AI. We're adding AI tools at CentralReach, and we're doing it in a thoughtful and methodical way, and trying to be ensuring that it's done in a safe and respectful way. But it is new to the field, and just like we had to prepare for the internet, and we had to prepare for computerized assessments, and apparently we had to prepare to get rid of tape off of our legs. Um,
Mhm.
and particularly for the rest of you, because you guys are much more customer facing than I am on a day-to-day basis. What are we what does the field need from us in order to prepare to adopt this technology in a safe way? And just to reassure what are the kinds of things that we're doing, and I can weigh in better on this part, to make sure that we're doing it responsibly.
Yeah, I mean,
Which
sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah,
Yes.
I can, I think again, going back to AI and that, like when we look at some of the tools and the velocity that we can apply um, and reach, in development, I mean, that's really the power of AI in my mind is that if I had to write code to do everything that, we can tap an LLM to do, it would take infinitely longer and frankly, in some ways wouldn't be as good. But I think we can move at a speed that other companies can. And and so on the positive side, like I feel like, for a market leader like us who has resources that can kind of understand the technology, um, we can move super fast and we can move super fast because um, we have the assets. So, you guys each talked about this, and I think this to me is like the most eye-opening and I think important component going back to the startup with the salespeople and engineers and, smart people and whatever who the people driving our AI are not engineers. Like who are creating the solutions? It's like you guys. It's our subject matter experts. On the RCM side, it's our RCM experts. It's the Adam Sellers of the world and the Andrew Fosters and the people who've been doing this job for, as many years as I can count, right? And they're experts. And on the clinical side, it's, we have Kelly King, and I shouldn't throw these names out. People will be like, hey, I need to call this person and see. But I mean, like, right? I mean, she comes up with great ideas and she's like, going into the LLM and going, okay, I have a problem. I know I'm sitting there, this is what a therapist needs. I just need, like, let me see if I can figure out how to do this. And they do it. Right. And so the engineering piece for us is just integration and data access at the most part and scalability, which are all very important and security and all that kind of stuff. But it's less about that. And it's more about having the experts who are sitting in the chair, but have access to data that nobody else in the industry has of 3 billion plus data points, right? Their expertise, in the field, the existing functionality, everything we've built over the last, since 2012 when we started this, like allows us to move faster because we have all these things embedded in the application that we can be like, oh, well, how do we do this? And present a simple workflow for them to fix, something on claim check. Well, we have notes, we have alerts, we have this, like we just string these things together and all of a sudden somebody's job got way simpler than logging into, multiple systems and, doing that. And so that to me is like the exciting piece. And then, and I think it allows us to kind of create and leverage what we have to create solutions for our customers. And what we hear from customers is this is like, I need it now. Right. This is so important because, whether it's claims or it's outcomes or it's how do I, improve the retention of my staff? Like these are needle mover things in terms of the impact on our customers' margins and cash flow and the outcomes that they can deliver kind of to those that they're working with. So going back to your considerations though, on the flip side, and it's something that came from, I think of it as two ends of the spectrum. So for me, as we started going down this path, one of the first things I told Dave and others is we need a document, a framework, something that explains why what we're doing is better, why we believe like what we're doing is the right way. But then interestingly, which again is the way that things I think always work because we have experts, it was you guys and others who are from the field going, we have to do this right. Right. And So there was like the people doing the solutions were getting it from both ends, which is like, we got to make ethics a consideration. We have to make compliance a consideration. It has to be transparent. And so we created that, right? And we have, and when you think about the application of AI, to me, it's a combination of two things, which is one, the philosophy that you're using and applying. In our philosophy, going back, and again, we'll keep saying this over and over again, is to help our customers boost their workforce with AI, not to replace their workforce with AI. And I think that's a huge, again, it doesn't sound that different, but the kinds of solutions that you reach for are very different, right? In one case, you're trying to make a AI a clinician, which I don't think it's anywhere near capable of doing. And we don't want that, right? In the other case, I'm trying to take all these workflow items and simplify, shorten, streamline so that we can boost the capacity without taking away from the quality of what, our folks can do. Right. And so, and so that's one. And then when we go back to our framework, which I can touch on, and then you guys should elaborate on, but, because you developed it, in a field like ours, like if you think about where AI gets used, right, it can like take somebody's face and like put it on somebody else's, like there's like fun things, like, and it's not that impactful. Sometimes it is, depending on what they're, using it for. But you can push the boundaries of what it does, like make it, it's a demo, it can do like all kinds of fun stuff. But when it comes to like a clinical setting like ours, it has to be precise. It has to have specialized knowledge. It has to be ethical. And it's got to be compliant, right? And so that's where the framework comes in, and that's where having the ability to train it on our own data, to ring fence it, so it's not going out to the internet and like looking at all the, nonsense that's out there, and then applying it to workflow processes and not clinical processes, I think enables it to be something that is much less, you minimize the potential negative impact and you maximize the positive. And so, we don't advocate, we would never tell anybody like, hey, once the AI does it, like just forget about it. Like, you don't even have to check it. It's like a 90-10 solution at best, right? Which is, it's taking 90% of the work off your plate. But you got to put your time in that last 10%. But that last 10% then is QA, it's the story, it's everything else. And as a result, you're going to get a better kind of output. So, so we have the framework. I like shortened it to RABA, which is, responsible AI for behavior analysis. And, and I think, again, you guys should talk about it, but it's, for me, it's like specialized and accurate. It's transparent. It's responsive, it's safe, secure, and private, and it's ethical and compliant. And if we have a solution that doesn't kind of check all those boxes, then we're not going to be kind of rolling it out. So I'll stop there, but,
Yeah, I
and
think
love your thoughts.
a couple of things were coming to mind, probably more than I will say because I want other people to have an opportunity to speak. But one thing I will say is the selection of Dave Stevens to head AI at CentralReach. I just want everybody to know we had Dave on, so maybe people picked this up already. He is a brilliant human being, and he is in love with ABA. He has read more ABA than some behavior analysts I know, and he's steeped in, he really does understand who we are, what our science is, and what we're trying to do. So I think that is one thing that helps it for me to feel more secure in anything we're doing. I know that he understands, and he's not going to sign off on something that is going to do harm in any kind of way. But kind of a bigger picture idea, when you said when we focus on workflows, not replacing the work of a person. To me, that's the most exciting piece of this. And I think about my time doing clinical work, how oftentimes I was winging it in some ways because I didn't have time to gather all of that information. We're behavior analysts. We love data. We want to make sure everything that we do is data based. But to be honest, sometimes I was flying by the seat of my pants and looking at the data afterwards if I'm lucky. And one of the great things that we get to do in CentralReach is look at large amounts of data. Even within the institute, we've had all of these ideas in the back of our heads. What can we predict? What do we know based on this data? Um, and could we use individualized information on a learner who's taking courses in our system to help even just tailor to them what their professional development should look like? What if, as a supervisor, as you're paying for people to go to conferences, you actually could see where their skills and deficits are and help them structure, hey, I'm going to go do this while I'm at this conference, or I'm going to catch this, or I'm not going to go to the conference. I'm going to pay for specialized training online in this. Just little bitty things like that, that our AI embeds are going to be able to do so much to give back to those organizations in terms of workforce development that is just so far beyond what we could have done 2 years ago. We were dreaming about it, but we're going to be able to do those kinds of things very, very soon. And that is exciting to me. Also, just to make our customers feel happy, I hope we have AI tools too, and that means whenever you ask us for content, the types of skills that are gonna be required to go into developing content now are gonna be content related, so much more than they are process of actually building a course, because we're gonna have so much help. So, I'm gonna leave off there and let other people talk.
I was going to touch a little bit on the ethics component. I think, what is so beautiful about the evolution of talking about bringing AI into CentralReach and where we are today is that we are working collaboratively to see what is out there in other related medical fields. What have they done, right? They've done this, they're doing this. I know Dave Stevens talks a lot about pajama time and how that supports the clinician to be able to actually have their notes done effectively and quickly, because a lot of that time is done after seeing the patient. And if you've seen 10 to 20 patients in a day, how do you recall every single session, every single client or patient you've seen? So I think there's a level of ethically looking at the other spaces that have done this, the AMA, supporting the medical field in doing this, and then looking back as a team. A lot of our subject matter experts are evaluating our ethics code, the literature in the AMA that's been approved from other fields, and then some of the literature that's come out in our own field to ensure that when we look at each product that has Carry or AI embedded, that it's looking into that quality assurance and that ethical component and saying, we as a team agree and believe that this is going to solve those efficiencies, but still require that clinician to have that last touch point, that we're looking at it from all angles to ensure that when the field has questions, we're ready to address them and allow them to understand we have thought this through wholeheartedly. And we're not just pushing something out quickly, but in support of our ethics code. And again, do no harm, that we're doing right by the clients that are being served by all of these products.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that's what our customers are looking for, right? It can be 10% of QA if it's coming from a clinical lens to begin with. So the fact that Dave Stevens is involved, but also Shannon Hill and Nissa, Van Etten and Kelly King, that's huge, because then it is 10% Q&A, because we are putting things like diversity, equity, inclusion as part of that lens. We're putting Ascent in as part of that lens when we're considering these best practices and things that we're feeding to AI. And I think that's so crucial, because the orgs, they want a fast solution and they need a solution, but they need a solution that fits their values. And they're not going to buy into something that doesn't, right? And it doesn't help them if it doesn't, right? So I think that's what, from the conversations I have, is like, yeah, like RBT chatbot, for example, how's it going to respond? But is it going to respond to my technicians in a way that I feel comfortable with as a clinician? Because that's first and foremost to them. And I think because we've involved these amazing experts at CR with all these varying backgrounds, I think we are able to do that. And I think that sets us apart from anyone else in the industry who may attempt these same tools.
Yeah. The only thing, one thing I would say just to expand on that a little bit is I agree. I think the vast majority of customers that I talk to and that we see absolutely feel the way you talk about. We do have customers who are, their heads underwater. They need a solution. Um, and, there's, again, not to like, I think startups are good and, I think we need innovation in the industry, but it needs to be done right. Right. Um, and so what I see sometimes is, customers working with somebody and they don't have a framework like this. They don't have resources like this.
Oh,
And you're giving them your
exactly.
data. You're right. And you don't know what their black box is doing. Right. And um, so what I would, one piece of advice, um, and again, not to be self-serving, but we've given this, so much thought internally is like use the framework we have. And no matter who you work with, like that's what you should evaluate it on before you give somebody your data. Make sure that these are the things they're focused on. What kind of resources are they when they roll out a solution and it has, something to do with the clinical aspect, like who's vetting that internally, right? Are you the QA person? Like,
Hmm.
are your client the
Absolutely.
QA person? Or do you have folks like this? Because again, going back to like our solution and nothing is perfect. And but I'm so excited, and your point about Dave is right. Like, nobody's more passionate about technology or the field almost than Dave, which is why we made him the choice. Um, but we couldn't roll something out. Like, if we were just steamrolling these products and
Yeah.
putting them out, one, you wouldn't have me on the behavioral view because behind the scenes you'd be like, we got to get him out of here because he's like, right? Because we have too many experts and too many people who've spent their entire lives, like Dr. Partington, Dr. Mueller, Rick, like all of you. This is your life. Like you've spent your lives trying to progress the field forward and doing something, that would hinder that, take a step back or even, even worse, like go in the wrong direction. I just, we would either have a mutiny or there'd be some kind of, and so again, it doesn't mean that what we have is perfect, but I do think that you need that, like that check and balance. And some of the providers I see don't have, like, I don't know what the check and balance is other than a customer. And at that point, it's a little bit too late. Right. And um, so I think it's really important. I think having a, framework and the resources, and that's why we've kind of made these investments and we've continued to make the investments. And then going back to my point of who drives this, like Dave is architecting the thing, but
Yeah.
the people who are driving it are you guys, right?
Well,
You're
and
doing stuff that I didn't tell you to do. Like you're just like, hey, I have a tool, I have this problem, and I see an opportunity to kind of solve it in a good way, and I'm going to make sure we do it right. Um, and that's the beauty of AI is if you've got subject matter experts, um, they can create solutions like that are going to satisfy what we need in the field, and you don't need a bunch of smart engineers to kind of do.
yeah, and I think I want to go just a little step further for our audience, just to say, as a clinician, I don't work for companies that I don't feel good about, and so when we come on here and we talk about working at CR, we tend to sound kind of kumbaya and all that, and we are, but the reason that we are is that we can fight, and we do, and I think Chris is saying this very nicely, and I'm going to just put it a little bit more graphically. It Nobody. I don't no one loves Dave Stevens more than I do, more than Heather does, more than Nissa does, but we also don't have a problem saying, "Wait a minute, what are you
Yeah.
doing?" And we try to have those hard conversations within ourselves before anything comes out and touches any customer in any kind of way. But I did wanna kinda close on one thing because we have some alphas and some betas out there, and we are getting feedback from some customers early on, and I personally have been a little bit surprised at what kinds of things are coming back in terms of helping our customers actually adopt the technology. So I think that there's some change management necessary that maybe we should be thinking about. How do we help people through just broadly change management? Maybe those are some things we need to have in the institute as well. But some of the things have been just like, if the icon at the bottom of the page just says Carrie, might not understand that that's where I click to go and interact with the AI. So some of it we think so big sometimes, but the real obstacle can be very tiny things. Have you guys noticed anything else that surprised you from these alphas and betas?
I think I'm just seeing like just what Nissa said earlier, that we have to take into consideration where was holding on tight to her stickers on her pants, right?
Yeah.
And she really, that was a hard transition for her. And I think it was a hard transition when we had the internet. And I think AI's the same. And I think we are taking that for advantage a little bit because we really enjoy it and we see all the things it's doing. But I think that it is something that we have to educate, and we do have to think about, like, this is a transition for most people to start utilizing these tools and thinking about these tools as, I have this question. What should I do? Oh, I should ask the chat bot that's right here. They're not thinking like that yet, right? Because it's still brand new. So I think that's part of it, is like, we're like with RBT chatbot, right? We're seeing, wow, it's not being utilized as much as we thought. Like, what a cool resource. I would be using this every day, but that's not their first thought, because that's, there's no history with that previously, right? So I think that's what I'm kind of seeing. And I think we've seen this with every big new piece of technology that's ever existed in our lifetimes. And so I think just thinking about how we can educate and start to build that into everybody's everyday as like the first. And I'm still learning too, where I'm like, oh, you know what? I have that question. I'm not going to ask Google. I'm going to ask ChatGPT. Like, they're going to give me way better information, right? And so just retraining ourselves, I think, is what I'm saying.
The other thing I guess I would add to that, I agree completely on change management. And one of the reasons we've taken the approach that we have, again, in a big picture way, is that this is an opt-in technology.
Yeah.
Right. So we are not embedding it in, and there's like some AI behind the scenes, and you're like, you don't know. It goes back to the transparency, right? As a user, like, what's going on? Like, there's a black box. And so I do think that can help, because we certainly have, I mean, we've got some customers who just like get it, right? And they are like using it, and they're coming up with, and it's the beauty of it, they're coming up with use cases that we didn't even think about when we rolled it out. And they're great use cases, right? Because they're users just like you guys. And they're like, oh, well, I could do this. Like, now that I see what it can do. And so it does allow for kind of that adoption curve to kind of play out, which is the early adopters can dive in and know that we've kind of gone through all this. Like, it has to check all these boxes before. So you're not an early adopter in terms of a guinea pig. You're an early adopter in terms of validating the technology and confirming and helping us shape it. But if you're not an early adopter, you can just wait. And you can keep doing it with, the stickers on your pants. Like, that's fine. But what you'll see is that as more and more people use, there'll be data that validates what we're doing. And we know the field's data driven. And so the more data that's out there, like, oh, this is safe. Oh, these people this would really help me. Like, now I'm ready to take advantage. So again, I think that's also, part of this is, I don't want to force anybody to take advantage of the technology if they don't want to. But for those that do, there's a meaningful impact that they can have on their business. And I think we're seeing that both through the proof of concepts that we do. We do proof of concept beta before we even roll it out of everything. But also, with now that we've rolled things out into production, just the adoption and the usage, it's pretty impressive.
Well, I don't think there's anything else I could say to top that. And it did also sound like maybe you mic dropped at some point during that speech. I'm not sure.
I knocked my water down. part of the problem of using your hands too much is if you got stuff on your desk.
This is what passion is like. It's in real
that's
time.
right. If you don't see my hands flying around, then I don't really care that much about what I'm talking about.
I want to thank you, Chris, for coming on, and Heather for joining us, and to all of our listeners or watchers, whatever you're doing, for joining us on this episode, and say thanks. And we'll see you next time on the Behavioral View.
Thank you. This was great. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Behavioral View.